On my third day of hunger, at the bottom of the trash bin, I found it. A single, moldy piece of bread. Not much bigger than my paw, covered in something that smelled like defeat and tasted like survival. But as I held it between my teeth, I realized this wasn't just food. This was the moment that would define whether I lived or died on these unforgiving streets. But let me take you back to how I got here, to that plastic box where my world began and ended in the same breath. I was born in darkness. Not the peaceful darkness of a warm home, but the suffocating darkness of a cardboard box left behind a convenience store. My mother's warmth was the only light I knew for the first few weeks of my life. Her heartbeat was my lullaby, her milk my lifeline, her rough tongue cleaning my fur the only gentleness this world would ever offer me. There were 4 of us in that box. My 3 siblings and me, huddled together like tiny, breathing puzzle pieces. We didn't have names, just the desperate need to survive each cold night, each hungry dawn. I was the smallest, the runt. While my brothers and sister fought for the best nursing spots, I learned to wait, to take what was left, to make the most of the scraps. My mother would disappear for hours, sometimes days, hunting for food in a concrete jungle that showed no mercy to creatures like us. I would listen to her paws padding away into the distance, each step taking her further from our makeshift sanctuary, and I'd press closer to my siblings, sharing whatever warmth we could muster. The first time I opened my eyes, the world was gray. Gray concrete, gray sky, gray shadows that moved with purpose I couldn't understand. Giant shapes, humans, would occasionally pass by our hiding spot, their massive feet creating earthquakes in our small universe. Some would glance down with what I now know was pity. Others wouldn't even notice we existed. But then came the day that changed everything. I was maybe 6 weeks old when my mother didn't come back. The first day, we waited. The second day, we cried, small, desperate mews that echoed off the concrete walls. By the third day, we were weak, hungry, and beginning to understand a truth that no living creature should learn so young: we were alone. My siblings grew quieter with each passing hour. I watched as their small bodies seemed to shrink into themselves, conserving energy that was already running dangerously low. The strongest of us, my brother, tried to venture out of the box once. He came back trembling, having encountered something in the outside world that had shaken him to his core. That's when I made my first real decision as a conscious being. If we stayed in that box, we would die. If I ventured out, I might die. But at least dying while trying felt like living. I left my siblings that 4th morning. Not because I didn't love them, but because love sometimes means making choices that break your heart. I climbed out of our cardboard world and stepped into the vast, terrifying reality of the street. The first thing that hit me wasn't the sight or sound of the street, it was the smell. Layers upon layers of scents that my primitive brain tried desperately to categorize: food, danger, other animals, humans, rain, garbage, fear, hope. It was overwhelming, like trying to drink from a fire hose. My first lesson in street survival came within minutes. A massive German shepherd, easily 10 times my size, appeared around the corner of our alley. His eyes locked onto mine with the kind of intensity that makes prey animals freeze. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I was so small, so weak, that running seemed pointless. Instead, I did something that surprised us both: I didn't move. I sat down and stared back at him. Maybe it was exhaustion, maybe it was some deep evolutionary wisdom, but I held my ground. The dog studied me for what felt like hours but was probably only seconds. Then, perhaps recognizing that I posed no threat, or maybe seeing something of his own struggle reflected in my desperate eyes, he simply walked away. Subscribe and comment, because what happened next taught me a lesson about survival that every street cat knows, but few humans ever understand. That encounter taught me my first survival rule: sometimes the appearance of fearlessness is more powerful than actual size or strength. But appearances don't fill empty stomachs, and by my second day alone, I was learning that hunger is a teacher unlike any other. I found my first real meal in the most unlikely place, a child's dropped ice cream cone. Not the ice cream itself, which had melted into a sweet puddle on the hot concrete, but the cone. It was stale, barely edible, but it was food. As I gnawed on that cone, I realized I was developing a palate that no house cat would ever understand, the taste of survival. The nights were the hardest. While house cats sleep peacefully on soft beds, I learned to sleep with one eye open, always listening for the sounds that meant danger, the heavy footsteps of humans who might kick rather than pet, the rustling that could mean rats, potential food if I was lucky, competition if I wasn't, or worse, the sounds of larger predators who saw me as nothing more than a snack. I found shelter wherever I could, under parked cars, in the narrow spaces between buildings, once memorably inside a large plant pot outside a closed restaurant. Each hiding spot taught me something new about the architecture of survival. The space under Mrs. Chen's vegetable stand became my favorite during rainy days. She never shooed me away, and sometimes small pieces of lettuce or carrot would fall through the wooden slats. And here's the part no one would ever expect. On my 10th day alone, as I was investigating a promising smell near the dumpster behind the bakery, I heard it. A sound so familiar yet so unexpected that it stopped me mid-step. A tiny mew, weak and desperate, coming from inside the dumpster. I climbed up, using my now sharpened claws to grip the metal sides, and peered into the darkness. There, huddled among the garbage bags, was another kitten. Smaller than me, if that was possible, with matted fur and eyes that held the same desperate hunger I saw in my reflection in puddles. Every survival instinct I had developed screamed at me to leave. Resources were scarce, and sharing meant less for me. But something deeper than instinct, something that connected to those early days with my siblings, made me climb down into that dumpster. I spent that night cleaning the smaller kitten's fur with my rough tongue, the way my mother had once cleaned mine. I shared the few scraps of food I had managed to gather. As we huddled together against the cold metal walls, I realized I had just made a choice that would define not just my survival, but the kind of cat I would become. The next morning brought our first real test together. A garbage truck rumbled into the alley, its massive hydraulic systems preparing to empty our temporary shelter. The sound was deafening, the danger immediate. I could have escaped easily by myself, but I had this small life depending on me now. I grabbed the kitten by the scruff of his neck, the way mother cats carry their babies, and made a desperate leap from the dumpster to a nearby fire escape. We landed hard, both of us tumbling onto the metal grating, but we were alive. As I licked a small cut on the kitten's head, he looked up at me with trust so complete it was both heartwarming and terrifying. That's when I found it. Not just the breadcrumb I mentioned at the beginning, but something more valuable. Purpose. Taking care of another creature gave my survival a meaning beyond just existing. Every day became about finding enough food for two, locating shelter that could protect two small bodies, staying alert to dangers that threatened both of us. We developed a rhythm over the following weeks. I would scout for food and danger while he stayed hidden in whatever safe spot we had claimed for the day. When I returned, sometimes with food, sometimes with just the reassurance that the area was safe, he would emerge with that same trusting look that reminded me why I had chosen connection over solitary survival. The bond between us became our greatest strength. Two sets of eyes to watch for danger, two noses to detect food sources, two bodies to share warmth during the coldest nights. But it also became our greatest vulnerability. Protecting someone else meant taking risks I never would have taken for myself alone. Share and subscribe to keep this journey alive, because what I'm about to tell you will change how you see every stray cat you ever encounter again. One rainy evening, about a month into our partnership, we were caught in the open when the skies opened up. Rain, to a house cat, might mean staying indoors and watching water run down windows. To us, it meant potential death. Our fur, already thin from malnutrition, provided little protection against the cold water. Hypothermia was a real threat. We took shelter under an abandoned car, but the water was pooling around us, and our small bodies were losing heat faster than we could generate it. I pressed against my companion, trying to share what little warmth I had, but I could feel both of us weakening. That's when I saw her, an elderly woman with an umbrella, moving slowly through the rain. She paused near our hiding spot, and I saw her eyes find us in the dim light. For a moment, we stared at each other across the vast divide between species, between the housed and the homeless, between those who choose their fate and those who simply endure it. She didn't try to catch us. Instead, she went into the nearby convenience store and emerged with a small bag. She left it near our hiding spot and walked away without looking back. Inside the bag, we found a small towel, dry and warm, and 2 cans of cat food. As we huddled under that towel, sharing our first real meal in days, I understood something profound about the relationship between humans and cats. It's not always about ownership or domestication. Sometimes it's about recognizing shared vulnerability, about one vulnerable creature helping another without expecting anything in return. That towel became our most precious possession. Not just because it kept us warm, but because it represented something I had thought was impossible on the streets: kindness without conditions. We carried it with us as we moved from hiding place to hiding place, a small square of fabric that had become our symbol of hope. Winter was approaching, and with it came challenges that would test everything we had learned about survival. Food became scarcer as humans spent less time outdoors, leaving fewer scraps for creatures like us. The cold became more dangerous, turning rain into ice and making every night a battle against hypothermia. But we had each other, and we had learned the most important lesson of street survival: adaptation. We changed our hunting patterns, focusing on the warmest parts of the day. We found new shelter spots, places that retained heat from the day's sun or were protected from the wind. We learned to read the subtle changes in human behavior that signaled opportunities for food. Most importantly, we learned that survival isn't just about staying alive, it's about maintaining the qualities that make life worth living. Despite the hardships, despite the constant threat of danger, we still played. We still showed affection. We still found moments of joy in small discoveries: a sunny spot that was perfectly warm, a particularly interesting smell, the satisfaction of a successful hunt. Our story isn't unique. Every stray cat has a version of this tale, a story of loss, adaptation, survival, and if they're lucky, connection. We represent the thousands of cats who navigate urban jungles every day, who have learned to find sustenance in humanity's leftovers, who have adapted to a world not designed for them. That moldy piece of bread I found in the dumpster. It wasn't just food. It was a symbol of everything we had learned, that survival often comes in forms you don't expect, that sometimes the least appetizing option is still worth fighting for, and that sharing even the smallest blessing can transform it into something larger than itself. 6 months later, as I write this story in my mind, my companion and I have established a territory near the market district. We know which vendors are likely to drop food, which humans to approach and which to avoid, where to find the warmest sleeping spots and the safest hiding places during storms. We're no longer the desperate, starving kittens who first found each other in that dumpster. We're survivors, adapted to our environment, confident in our abilities, bonded by shared hardship and mutual care. Every day brings new challenges, but also new opportunities to prove that life, even life on the margins, is worth fighting for. The next time you see a stray cat, remember this story. Remember that behind those cautious eyes is a creature who has learned lessons about resilience, adaptation, and survival that most humans never face. We're not just strays, we're proof that life finds a way, that connection transcends circumstances, and that sometimes the most profound bonds are forged in the most unlikely places. That piece of bread taught me that survival isn't about taking everything for yourself, it's about making the choice to share, even when you have almost nothing left to give.